Nice goal. Oh, thanks, Daniel. Catherine. Catherine.
All right, folks, let's find our way back to our seats. We got so busy talking.
It depends on the authors who have done them and if it doesn't. Might have been put away by now. Hold on for next time.
All right, folks, we'll come back. Thank you. We're just going to wait for the escalators to get turned off. Thank you, Zoe. Welcome back, everyone. And hello to our audience on Zoom. Send us a little chat if you can't hear anything, then we'll know. Before I introduce our featured poets, please remember that we're inviting both our live and live streamed audiences to write poems in response to the poetry of the season's featured poets. A call for submissions will open in 2025, and we'll be selecting poetry for our forthcoming anthology of response poems. You can read all about it on our website, as well as our Poem a Month challenge. If you're not yet a newsletter subscriber, please do go to planetearthpoetry.com and sign up so you can stay in the loop. Our first poet tonight is Julie Paul. Julie Paul has published 5 books of poetry and short fiction, including Whiny Baby, Montreal University Press, 2024. She won the 2015 Victoria Book Prize, and her first poetry collection, The Rules of the Kingdom, was a finalist for both the Dorothy Livesay Poetry Prize and the Gerald Lampert Memorial Award. Please welcome Julie.
Thanks, Catherine. Thanks to everyone for coming, and what a wonderful open mic. Wow, really amazing. Huge hand to you. I just want to mention before we get started that Catherine is longlisted not only for 1 poem this year in the CBC contest, but 2. So big hand to you, Catherine. Wonderful. You can hear me okay? Okay, wonderful. It's an honor to read with Tom Wayman. Tom's poetry was some of the first poetry that I read as a teenager. I have an anthology here that my dad gave me at the end of high school, and huge inspiration for me to think in a poetic way. So thanks, Tom. Great to see you. So I will read mostly from Whiny Baby, but I have a few new poems as well that I'll put in there too. Whiny Baby is mostly about me. I am the whiny baby, but you might be the whiny baby too. Wait to see. No. Musical chairs. Mama, my maternal grandma, always said, "Don't be bold," which meant don't be rude, which meant speaking my mind or feelings. So I clamped my mouth right up, tight as my Catholic thighs, years before I knew that was the boldest place from which to speak. One grandma used God, the other zest soap, and they both worked wonders to keep me clean enough to hold their love and my seat in heaven, a chair that was never guaranteed to still be there when the music stopped. I was mostly a good girl, but I was also bossy, and this poem is dedicated to my childhood friend Jennifer Playfair. The name is ironic. She played fair, I didn't always. Mea culpa, Cedar Grove Castle Confiteor. We wore our hair in crown braids, and although your name was a pretty one, I called you Elizabeth, Mary, whatever I wanted. In our make-believe castle behind my house, cedar trees circling an old barn's foundation, I would judge and decree from an overturned washtub, banish feckless siblings to the backyard sandbox, but keep you, my friend, close by my side. Imagined subjects bowed and praised our rule, beneficent but firm, waited for ceremony, lifted their hands to our skirts. One illumined day, or was it every day, I was blessed by the frisson of sudden truth. I was more priest than queen, more god than royalty, more anything than you. I ordered you to gather fallen boughs, their crumbling filigree, then sprinkled their rust upon your forehead and demanded not only fealty, but sorrow. What choice did you give me? You were younger than me by a year, wore misshapen, handmade sweaters, holy cable tights wormed up your legs. You ate scabby apples right down to the stem. My belted white nightgown, ruffled, flowing, stood in as a royal gown. And in case you forgot, it proclaimed angel in gold script above the heart. Here's a newer poem, Childhood. You may remember the toy called Lemon Twist. Lemon Twist. Summer's ball and chain gives me an ache in one hip from the swing, an ache in one foot from the jump, a scrape in the ear from the scuff, a buzz in the blood from the count. A nose full of lilac and tar melt, a mess of fresh sweat neath my French braid, a scalp all a sting from black fly bites, a wish on the lip, purple freezy, a wish in my head, the world's best. Swimming lessons, grade 6. The pool waits like an open mouth. Your unkissed lips are a magenta ring around the lips of the supine kid, and once you tilt his chin and pinch his nose, they make a perfect seal. The Doritos that didn't get passed to you on the school bus coming into town are now your Doritos as you puff tiny breaths into the little jerk on the tiles and pretend to save his life. We might have all been there. This one's dedicated to my paternal grandma, so it was nice to hear another grandma poem tonight. After losing his father and then his brother, the tradition began. Every Sunday night, my young father took his shirts next door to his mother, who ironed them for $1 apiece. The money was not the point. Neither was the ironing, although the shirts needed pressing for the work week ahead. In Nana's practiced hand on her silver-skinned board, the iron hissed and spit like a demon and didn't miss a single thread. She always said she loved the job, but of course it was my father she loved, and having a way to reach him from her island of loss, which was his island too. They were calling from different shores across the same dark waters to one another and answering with wrinkled shirts, a problem she could solve before the evening news. Birding at night. The dress she wore to your wedding is not the same dress she was buried in. One was the color of a bohemian waxwing, the other an eastern bluebird. You're not crying. There's sleep in your eyes. Or is it the smoke, the pollen, your lack of self-restraint? The land of grief has you cowbirded, an egg abandoned in the nest of another species that will, in turn, eventually do the same to her own. Who's writing this song? A woman in the dark, listening to a conversation between two barred owls. What is longing? Hands reaching like wings around nothing that can be held. The woman is you. The woman is anyone. The owls ask the same question back and forth. Hoo-hoo, 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 hoo-hoo. The answer is a hard apple swallowed whole. No one cooks for you. Let's skip ahead. There's a 20-something page poem in the middle. I won't read tonight. You can have a look. Yellow Birch. I turned 17 beneath a canoe in a thunderstorm, mouth and hands messing with love for a spoiled Italian boy in silky shorts. Bark Lake Leadership Camp. The same place I wrote one word on a giant piece of paper to describe how I felt in the forest. Small. This morning, my daughter, 17, showed up on my Instagram feed at a party 3,000 miles away. I am trying to let go. I should be trying. I promise to begin. Beneath the birch's loosened bark, a second skin. I am an empty nester. And here's a little triolet about that. The empty nester, 5 years along. This table bears the scars of art, weeping wax and long division. And I, the mom, have played my part. This table bears the scars of art, paint, packages to send my heart to my heart, a ceaseless mission. This table bears the scars of art, weeping, wax, and long division. I'll read another new poem, a prose poem. And I promised that my cat Lenny would feature tonight. Here he is. Instead of a sports car, the middle-aged poet gets a kitten. This recently appeared in Juniper magazine. The metaphor is hungry. The metaphor is growing in leaps and bounds, big enough to spring from bed to chair to bookshelf, then climb. Things are beginning to fly to the ground. The metaphor still uses a baby voice, but when it wants to go outside, it cranks the volume. The metaphor grabs treats, toes, hearts. The metaphor is slender enough so that you can feel its ribs. When you pick it up, it's as light as a sweater and just as soft, but it has the bone structure of a behemoth. The metaphor is a hunter, adept at little bugs right now, but it's got Mouser written all over it. The metaphor looks at everything as possible food or toy. It wants you to pet it. It reaches for you. In the silent house, it sneaks up behind you and jumps on your back. You scream, but your fright does not scare it away for long. The metaphor sleeps deeply after meals and dozes in sunbeams, but zooms around the house in the wee hours. It stands on your chest and its tiny feet hit all the tender spots, the ones to press when anxious. It purrs on your throat and you ache with love and a startling loneliness. The metaphor has the hunger-driven fortitude to make you weaken. You feed it on demand. The metaphor will not stop growing. This is the smallest it will ever be. Since there might be a few writers in the house, I'll read a writer poem. The beat goes on. Save the Cat keeps coming up in conversation, a book on how to write a novel. 15 beats from start to finish, and voila, a story that works. I wonder what might happen if no cats appeared in the prose, or in the wider world itself. What if every carnivorous beast ate only flowers and lolled about in the grass like a pet rabbit? How weak would the plot become without teeth or chase or death? In my own work in progress, I have saved no one. But 6 years after this discovery of a 1 centimeter dragon, slayed before it devoured the breast in which it hid, no fire or scales have been detected. Just this week, a single red and frilly bloom on the hibiscus plant I was given as solace that day the beast was first discovered appeared like a self-aggrandizing metaphor on the very morning of the all-clear scan. And just to round out the story with some further pathetic fallacy, my tabby cat adores this plant, even though, or because, it contains a mild toxin that may cause hallucinations. Once a blossom falls, she carries it around the house like a dead bird, pleased as any predator. I know I should keep this plant far from my feline, but how can I take this small, rare pleasure from her wild free life. Wait, I hear a thunk just now. The bloom has fallen. It's a race to grab it before she does, but I make it. I beat her to it and take a moment to appreciate the symbolism of its still strong pistil, raised like a middle finger, before I compost the flower and save the cat again. And I'll finish with this poem, The Blocked Writer Looks to the Garden. And this is after a poem by James Wright called Lying in a Hammock at William Duffy's Farm in Pine Island, Minnesota. You may know it. The mock orange announces itself like a debutante on the staircase, and all faces turn toward its light. And still, it's not enough. Even though in this moment summer has arrived, the season I proclaim over and over to be my season, even though in this moment I feel happy, I am still left wanting. Do I think writing will make me happy? What if that isn't the goal? What if it's honesty? Am I winning? If so, is it a contest? I chase the deer from the garden. I string nets over the tender shoots and buds. I keep planting what they love. If there's a metaphor here, I'm ignoring it. If this is wasting my life. The mock orange doesn't mean to mock me, though I feel the sting of its 1,000 blooms. And what of it? All perfume, no fruit, and I love it anyway. When will I turn that grace upon myself? Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Julie. So as you can tell, Julie is a gorgeous poet, but I also think she has this magical capacity to like spread gorgeousness into other poets. And the reason I believe that is because she's a massage therapist. And whenever I tell somebody who my friend and massage therapist is, they go, oh, she's my massage therapist too. And these are all like very talented poets who are saying this. So I think she just like infuses us with amazing, amazing language. Thank you, Julie. So we now have our second poet who's a bit of a legend around here. Tom Wayman's newest books are How Can You Live Here? Poems 2024, and The Road to Appledore, or How I Went Back to the Land Without Ever Having Lived There in the First Place, a memoir 2024. He received BC's 2022 George Woodcock Award for Lifetime Achievement in the Literary Arts. Welcome, Tom Wayman, please.
So thank you very much, Catherine. And I really appreciate all you folks coming out, but also all the work that goes into putting on events like this. I've done a fair bit of that myself over the years, and so I really appreciate how much effort it takes. I live in southeastern British Columbia now, in a area near Nelson, BC, a rural area, and I was putting away a literary event that I'd helped set up in Silverton, BC, and it struck me that I had done this for quite a while. So this poem is called 50 Years of Stacking Chairs. I fold two and carry one in each hand between the small groups of people still talking, although most have left the room. I lean the chairs on ones already upright against a wall, or lower them atop a horizontal pile. Two of these chairs at a time are easily manageable, so back at the empty rows, I fold three and haul them with both hands across the space. Next trip I try 4, fingers on each hand curved under the metal backrests of 2 chairs. 50 years of unstacking and arranging them, center aisle or not, straight lines or semicircle, then clearing them. Anti-war event, community protest meeting, union meeting, addressed by a notable or activist figure in a cause I endorse, or by a novice or veteran writer, or panel involving 3 speakers. fractious debates or readings or talks I can hardly stay awake through. Chair after chair after chair. My 20s, 40s, 70s. Other volunteers, fellow members, friends of friends helping. And now the tables used by the presenters at the front or to collect tickets at the door must be tilted on one edge, the slide that locks the legs released, and these flattened against the table's underside before two of us hoist it toward a storage closet. Or if the tables don't weigh more than I can cope with, I grasp one of the metal rails underneath that secure the top, elevate it from the floor myself, and walk. The heavy risers, though, which form the temporary stage, must be detached from each other. Then two of us position a riser vertically, 1, 2, 3, heave, and we're bearing it toward a cart that is eventually filled, pushed toward a storeroom. When I began, I imagined a young person would appear decades later, take the chair out of my hand. Here, let me, you've done enough. Instead, people assemble as ever, but with fewer 20-year-olds each year, though the reasons to set out chairs are the same: permanent war, social injuries committed or threatened, a chance to listen to gnarly or astonishing words, ones that challenge or sing. My hair gray now, as metal chairs to shut at the close, lift away. So that was from a book that came out in 2020 that was called Watching a Man Break a Dog's Back, Poems for a Dark Time. In 2020, I certainly didn't know how dark the times are about to become. And what I meant by that phrase was simply the things that we faced before the pandemic and still do, from economic inequality that's ever growing on down the list that you all know. Not all the poems in it are about that except peripherally, but this is another kind of look back. It used to be that when we were in the street, because this was back in the days when people read, we would always hand out an information sheet that explained what we were doing. And so there's a poem about that called Leaflets. How many of these slips passed from my fingers into the fingers of the dubious, the mildly curious, the automatically polite, the supporters, the ones who thought I spoke too quickly, who wanted time to consider what they believed I was saying. Grape boycott, lettuce boycott, why the war was wrong. At a protest, the reasons a slogan or stance was correct compared to other slogans or positions. A warning against agents provocateurs. The arguments in favor of a strike, the reasons this picket line should be honored. Why a union continues to be the only way to defend against the arbitrary meanness of management. The facts that made the cut in welfare rates a scandal. The past actions of an official about to give an address which needed to be opposed. To show how the earth cannot be saved without social control of industry. Hands swollen and calloused with labor received these printed sheets, also hands with many rings, and hands with nails painted in the latest shade because a job depended on dressing as fashionably as possible on a meager salary. Hands blank as the faces that looked down at the leaflets received them, angry hands that crumpled the paper and threw it onto the sidewalk in front of me. As many and diverse hands as minutes in an hour, a lifetime, as trees that stand on the mountains that surround the valley, the city. Some of these firs and pines destined themselves to become leaflets, but that for now remain patient, enduring, oblivious. So I'm just gonna read 4 more poems from the new book. This is How Can You Live Here, which came out in this April. And a lot of it is set in the remote mountain valley where I live, Slocan Valley. And so this is the title poem, How Can You Live? How can you live here? No one asked, with only the moon for entertainment and the weather for advice, where the public thoroughfare is the swans and ducks on the winter river, or eagles and ravens coasting thermals over spring's wooded ridges. I am the deer, bedded down in the warm bracken for a short July night, or settled into a dip in the earth below the boughs of a fir during dark hours of autumn rain or snow squall. For music, I have the wind high in birch and hemlock. If I want to hear a story, that's what the fire in the stove is for. Neighbors, the seasons, who one by one drop around to check on me, see how I'm doing here. Not all the poems in this book are set in nature. There's a whole source of them, a whole set of them in domestic poems. This is one about a phenomenon that you may have observed, which is basically that if you have a painting, an original oil or whatever, and you hang it on the wall, it's all balanced up there. If you go by about 2 or 3 months later, you notice that it's crooked. And science cannot explain this because, after all, gravity pulls the same amount at either end of the picture, but there they are tilted. Well, I figured out exactly why this happens, and there's a little sonnet that explains it to you. So it's called The Source of Misalignment. A painting, when first hung on a wall of my house, aims to be a good resident, carefully maintaining the position in which I placed it. After some months, however, the artwork realizes I have become accustomed to its presence and don't even glance at it as I walk by. Alarmed at being treated as though invisible, the painting, in order to be noticed again, lowers one corner of its frame to hang aslant. At first, the incline is slight, but if the piece continues to feel ignored, the angle increases. I'm not a coat waiting in a closet, the gesture protests, nor a book to be read and shelved. I watch you daily. The least you can do is return the favor. There's a section in the new book about going through the pandemic, that unexpected dark time. Going through the pandemic in the rural was a little different than in an urban setting. We, obviously with less people around, some issues were different. And almost everything I read about people dealing with the pandemic was, of course, set in the cities because that's where most of the population is. But 20% live in the rural. However, this poem is about something that both urban and rural went through, which is that as science began to know more about how the virus functioned and how it was communicated, the kind of regulations or protocols, they called them, that we were meant to follow kept changing, and we had to kind of change along with them, of course, because, as I say, people knew more. This was probably hardest, at least in our area, on the kids in school, because first they couldn't go to school, then they could go, but they had to stay in a cohort, and then it was just, and then they were back out of school and then back in again. So they had a hard time. But anyway, it struck me at a certain point that this issue of having to follow these protocols was not all that different than a child's game that we used to play called Simon Says. For any of you who don't remember that, there's someone who's the leader of the game who gives orders, like Simon says, put your hand on top of your head, and then you have to do it. But if the leader gives you an order but doesn't say Simon says, and you follow that command, then you're either out of the game or you lose points or so on. So this is called protocols after the child's game, Simon Says. The authorities said, the virus says, put your hands on your hips. The authorities said, the virus says, raise your arms over your head. The authorities said, lean to your left. And then, wrong. Unless the virus says to, you don't do it. We'll try again. The authority said, the virus says, touch your nose with your right pointer finger. The authority said, the virus says, touch your nose with your left pointer finger. The authority said, touch your nose with both those fingers. Then wrong, unless the virus says to, don't. How hard is this to understand? They said the virus wanted us to shuffle in a complete circle, clockwise, followed by shuffling in a circle, counterclockwise. This was followed by the command to leap into the air, and immediately those who jumped were chastised because the virus hadn't specified this maneuver. Yet most of those listening had become wary and, correctly, hadn't budged. The authorities' next request followed without delay, and even the overly anxious to please, now had learned some caution, didn't respond automatically. However, a handful in the audience announced that henceforth they would obtain instructions direct from the virus, despite their lack of training in and comprehension of its language or any ability to interpret its intent. These people assured each other the authorities had a secret wish concerning the virus, which only the clear-sighted such as themselves could discern. We'll tell you what the virus needs, they insisted, if it really exists or has anything to say at all. And I'm gonna close out. There's a last section of poems about writing, and since there's so many writers here, it's kind of about the one joy we all get, and it's from traveling. The poem is called "The Road of Words." This pavement is firm, settled, but crumbly at the edges. In my mouth, the asphalt is tarry and leaves on my lips an aftertaste of salt, like the sea, like blood. Each inch of the road is where it ended for somebody, while the rest of us power by for now, over mountain passes and down out of the forest onto open plains, along high-speed freeways and slow detours through portions under repair. The surface I travel blocks sun and rain from the soil, yet carries me where I need to be. Grateful for how a sentence still follows sentence ahead. Word after word appears. Thank you.